All right, so we Paula and Paula. I can change this to.
And is the microphone coming just through this laptop?
So it'll be through this laptop, and so it's pretty echoey in here, and you'll just have to make sure. And so one thing actually, Dave, when you go into a different room and you go up there and talk and see how okay, will you talk?
Yeah, testing, presentation, sound. Are we echoing too much or too little?
The screen is not showing.
Yeah, I haven't shared it yet.
Yes. Testing, presentation, sound. Copy. About
Rivers, Rappahannock rivers. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, sure, not good.
Especially if I talk much louder than service. Testing sound for presentation.
How about we just pull the computer right here? I'm sure this is all major issues.
Go on this side. You okay with being on the right side?
We could probably even move it over more if we needed to. I don't know. Or just
I mean,
Yeah, honestly, if you face it that way, gonna get your voice better. And you might probably pull the podium this way a little bit.
all right.
I'll just tell the presenters. Maybe this for now.
So
And then how can I?
so here I'll show.
I just wanted to mute Zoom. So.
Yes, I was actually going to share. So the way that it's going to go is it's 20 minutes for presentation.
Yeah, testing sound for speaking from the podium. Okay, projecting, and then we're going to test talking about the weather and nature, times for our planet. Allow us to close the hour. Better.
Cool. It's not very. Yeah, I think that's. I think at this point it's probably just. Yeah.
Well, could you move the podium? Well, actually, so somebody will be sitting here.
She's sitting here.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, the only alternative is that,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
which is not ideal, but, and it also depends on how many people are there. There's one person sitting there.
Well, it doesn't even, can you, if you move the podium there, can you put the computer there?
The computer on the podium.
Yeah, would that work? And then the speaker is speaking and controlling the slides.
Yeah, I mean that's up
And
to you.
Zoom questions portion.
Then you'll have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think it's, at this point, I think it's fine. I mean, you can move it so they're looking right over you. And if you want, you can kind of,
And like I said, I can ask Harley if she
Yeah.
has a microphone and
Hey,
see
give me
if
the
there's.
next one. My concerns that were, what, 10 minutes?
This
oh,
one-
I've actually,
Yeah,
yeah,
this one doesn't start until like 10:45.
yes. So here, let me just go through real quick. So this ribbon, only you can see, so chat questions will be in here. Just keep an eye on participants, make sure that you can mute them, turn off their video if they do. It shouldn't interfere with anything.
Do I need to?
No, it's just, yeah, bounce around. And then, so, let's see. So the way that it is right now is that it's like sharing, it's full screen sharing PowerPoint. So are you pretty familiar with Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've screen 1, screen 2, so it's sharing screen 2, which is this full. So when you do like a PowerPoint, you click full screen, it opens up the full screen and essentially like a separate desktop almost. And so that's what this is. And so if you ever need to switch PowerPoints, you should be able to do that pretty easily. Just through the new share. You just have to open up the PowerPoint.
Okay.
But you just click escape and then that'll disappear and then pull up the new PowerPoint and then full screen again and then it'll start over. And then I pulled this onto here. Yes, I did. Okay, so this is where, and then, so I'm gonna go ahead and just, one of the things, so I did this in the wrong order, so I might just pull this here. Just everyone should get a disclaimer online when they log in that it's being recorded, but just in case anyone here.
And it's already being recorded.
It's automatically, yes. So this red dot means it's being recorded. So I'm gonna go ahead and just screen share and then screen share, and it already popped up. So yeah, so I think you should be good. And then if
Do we
you,
know what presentations we already have?
there, I have none in this right now. So
Okay.
so Brian just sent me a Google Drive, which I need to go do. So I will probably come back. And I would just leave the recording to record. So, and then just a reminder that everyone can hear you too. So if you start talking, but I'm gonna go ahead and mute this.
Welcome, everyone. My colleague Maggie McClellan had another conflict and she couldn't be here today, so I'm going to be flying solo. I'm going to be talking about how the Piedmont Environmental Council's farmland protection efforts are really starting to pull in a lot of partners and develop a holistic approach to land and water conservation. So in the last 3 to 4 years, we've kind of updated our model for protecting farmland using federal and state money and private funding as well. And I'm going to just outline that today. So before I dive into our farmland protection efforts, I think most of you know who the Piedmont Environmental Council is, or PEC. But we're kind of a unique land trust in that we do land conservation as well as land use and work with advocacy work, mostly focused around county comprehensive plans. So our mission is to promote and protect natural resources for our economy, history, and community, the Virginia Piedmont. So we're involved in a lot of different kinds of efforts. And then we work in 9 counties along the Blue Ridge, basically from Marvin down to Omaha. And I'm working in the Rappahannock Basin with Jackie, and then we have another colleague, so there's about 3 of us. And those are Rappahannock counties, Target, Fauquier, Orange County, Madison, just a little bit of movement. So it's kind of the central part of our service. I think most of you know what a conservation easement is, but I'll quickly review that. It is a voluntary agreement between landowner and a land trust, where they're limiting what can be done on a property. So they're giving up a few sticks of the bundle of rights that are associated with a property. So they're not designed to micromanage a property, but to really keep rural properties rural. So working farms, working forests, natural areas. And they have to have a strong conservation purpose and a public benefit. So the public benefit doesn't need to be public access, but you know, protecting any other resources, from scenic resources to prime and statewide significant soils to natural areas are some of the purposes. They have to be consistent with a comprehensive plan, and I think that's why historically PEC got into weighing in on comprehensive plans. So usually you can't do it in a designated growth area, and then they have to be consistent with the overall comprehensive plan. And finally, the last part is that they are permanent commitments, so they run with the title of the property, so they pass on to successive landowners. They're difficult to modify, so you want to have it right going into it. We try to make sure that landowners really know their property well and have a good sense of what they want to do with it over the long run before they jump into a conservation easement, so that it can be tailored along that. If you look at the cumulative impacts of private conservation efforts in our 9-county region, it's pretty phenomenal that we're almost up to 430,000 acres. And you can kind of see in terms of different things we've protected, the scale of that. And you can see how over the last 30 years, that's really, there's been a dramatic increase in land conservation. One thing that part of the reason we got the farmland protection efforts going is if you look at the center of our service area, it's kind of a hole in terms of land protection. And that's the Rappahannock Basin. And it turns out, that it's a really important area for farmland protection. But that's where a lot of the state prime and significant soils are concentrated in their large commodity scale farms. So a lot of those landowners have been reluctant to conserve their land, and part of it is the tax benefits aren't really that significant for them. They need a stronger financial incentive. So this partial purchase of development rights program is really taking off. So this is the Rappahannock watershed. You've probably seen this watershed now quite a bit. You can see the battlefields, the tributaries from the Rappahannock and others. And then there's, quite extensive rural historic districts come right up to the Shenandoah National Park. There's, quite a few public lands, but there's definitely a need for private land conservation as well. So it's a conservation-rich area for sure. So these are the different kind of efforts that we've been involved in. We've been working with the soil and water conservation districts, and we have these locally based conservation funds. So some of them are set up to pay the cost differential between basically what the landowner would be obliged to pay with cost share programs for implementing best management practices. We just started developing the Piedmont Grassland Bird Initiative, and that's with Smithsonian, Virginia Working Lands, and then American Farmland Trust, and then the Quail Working Group. So that's kind of a new program, but basically what we're trying to do is a lot of it is focuses on managing meadows properly. So, mowing around nesting season, and there is a restoration component as well. But we'll present more about that in the future as that gains momentum. And then I'm going to talk about the Farmland Protection Program again. That is relatively new, but with all volunteer conservation easement, landowners are eligible for the land preservation tax credits. With these partial PDRs, it's a competitive process, so you have to apply for first step federal funds and then state funds, and the NRCS pays 50% of the value of the conservation easement, and then you can match up to another 25%, and then the remaining percent is still eligible for tax credits, so that the donated portion is available for tax credits, but the purchase portion is not. We've also been able to attract some private funding through the Goldsboro Foundation to kind of get us going on this project. And then finally, the Headwaters Stream Initiative, and we are working really closely with the Friends of the Rappahannock on that and other agencies, and that's where we're working with landowners to plant native trees and shrubs along streams and rivers in the Rappahannock Basin. So a lot of times these partnerships are really helpful. So like with the Headwaters Stream Initiative, Brian and Adam got to know the Goodall brothers, and they own close to a 600-acre farm in Madison County. And they were planting a lot of trees, putting in buffers. They redid their pastures. They have watering systems in place. It's a beef cattle farm. They have about 2 miles of frontage on the Robinson River. It's a really phenomenal place, a great place to protect. In this case, through Brian's relationship with them, I got to know them, and then a couple of years into their tree planting efforts, I talked to them about a volunteer easement, and that didn't go anywhere. But then when I started getting some momentum going on the PBR program and revisited it with them, that was enough to make them move forward. And I think they're really excited about it. So a lot of these relationships can work either way, either through an agency like yours, where you might get to know them through, best management practices, and then, they become interested in conservation easements, or vice versa. There's some that, approach us for conservation easements, and then we work with partners to get stream buffers put in, which most of those things are required in easements. So, they've received award from like the Culpeper Saltwater Conservation District. They planted over or developed over 25 acres of buffers. This will list kind of all the things that they've been involved in, but it's just pretty phenomenal, the initiative that they've taken to protect their farm and the waterways that flow through it. So they're tapping into both federal and state programs. So like with a lot of these projects with the NRCS, they're called agricultural land easements, or ALE for short. Most of us like drinking ale, so it's easy to remember, but basically the ALE program is designed to protect working farms. And then again, it's through the NRCS. It is a competitive process, so not all farms are going to qualify. And they're looking for 50% or higher of prime or statewide significant soils. And then we've been, in order to pull in state money through VLCF, or Virginia Land Conservation Foundation, which is administered by DCR, you have to have a co-holder or third-party holder that's a state agency, and Soil and Water Conservation District is considered a state, so we pulled them in, the Culpeper district, and have gotten this going and making these farms eligible for matching state funds. Another thing that rates high is the Conserve Virginia priorities, and that, I think most of you are familiar with it, but it maps all the statewide conservation priorities across the state. And there is a concentration of those of Conserve Virginia priorities in the Upper Rappahannock watershed. These kind of projects, they do provide a stronger financial incentive, but because of the multiple application, the funding applications, usually there are 2 applications, one at the federal level and then another on the state level. They're pretty lengthy applications, but we've got a good template going on those. And then just the number of partners involved, so we've got NRCS has to review the final easement. The state does, because of the state funding, Soil and Water Conservation District, us, and then the landowner. So there's, these 5 parties that all have to agree on the terms and the language. But like I said, this kind of fledgling effort is really attracting a lot of partners. So again, PEC and Soil Water Conservation District are holding the easement. NRCS is providing funding. These projects do require farm plans, so we pull in Department of Forestry usually to develop the forest management plan. DCR or through VLCF is providing funding. And then like with the Headwaters initiative, that's where Friends of the Rappahannock is involved. And then, like I said, the Volgenol Foundation is covering some of our costs. So just these are kind of more expensive projects too, because NRCS requires a current survey of the property, and surveying these big farms is pretty expensive. So our among plus PEC has to pay for the appraisal, and they're like these federal yellow book appraisals that are like phone books. So we incur quite a cost. On average, it's probably about $40,000 of cost. So that's where it's helpful to pull in a private foundation like Volgenol. So we've been pretty excited because just over the last 4 years, we've been able to get quite a few farms from 3 of the big counties in the Upper Rappahannock. So it's kind of becoming basin wide, and a lot of it is just spreading by word of mouth among the farmers. And again, a lot of these farmers are ones who have been resistant to the deleted easements. So the first one that we did was with Glenberry Farm in Orange County. It's at the base of Clark Mountain. It's got over a mile of frontage on the Rappahannock River. That closed in 2018. And then all the others that are listed, the dates are when we receive the funding. The projects haven't closed yet. They're taking like 2 to 3 years. Hopefully we can get a better system going and expedite it. But that if you look at the totals, it's just over 2,500 acres. And part of the rationale for NRCS to develop the program too is to pay, the funding goes to the farmers and they can use it the way they want, but a lot of them reinvest that capital into their operations or buy more farmland. So you're supporting, some of the better farmers who, implement best management practices. And the owners of Glenberry, you can go to the next slide. The Nixon family, they were a great family to work with as a first family. They were Virginia Farmers of the Year a couple years. They, after we completed their project in 2018, the next year they turned around and bought another property, like a 700-acre property, and now they're talking to me about putting that under easement as well, and that's got further down the Rappahannock River. Plus, these guys are super influential in the community. They farm like 10,000 acres, so they lease quite a bit of property. So they're great ambassadors for farmland protection and best management practices. And then the last example is just one that was funded last year, and it's M&W Farm. It's in the Somerset area, but part of it's in Madison County and part of it's in Orange County, so it's right on the county line. But this is a really good example of a farm that is protecting a lot of conserved Virginia priorities. So the blue are priorities for water quality conservation. The green is was designated by the state as a priority for farmland and forest protection. And then you can also see, I guess the orange is this is right out of the Blue Ridge Turnpike, which is a scenic byway, so it's got scenic resources. And then finally, it has frontage both on the Rappahannock River and Blue Run, which is a natural heritage, stream conservation unit. So that it's got really good aquatic habitat as well. And these are just some pictures of it. You can see how scenic it is. This classic pastoral landscape of the Central Virginia with the Blue Ridge in the background. And then this is part of the Blue Run. There was an extensive wetland complex right there along Blue Run, and all of that will be fenced and have additional protection. So we're really excited about this kind of new tool and the way it's pulling all of us together to concentrate resources, on important farms to protect, and with really good operators. The big limiting factor is just that there isn't a lot of funding directed toward Virginia from the feds. So even though we're one of the top ag producers in the country, the amount of funding that we're getting, we're toward the bottom of the list. Like we're 30, I think we're maybe the 7th top state producer, but in terms of production, but then in terms of funding, we're like 35th. So we need to work to get more federal funding directed to Virginia, and the same with VLCF funding. The years that we've applied, we've pretty much dominated. We're getting PECs getting 80 to 100% of the federal resources, and that's just to protect 1 or 2 farms. And then same with the farmland protection funding through the LCF. So if we want this to expand and take hold in other parts of the state, we need a lot more federal and state funding. And part of the way collectively we can do that is through just submitting more applications and demonstrating they really look at that. So last year was the first year that we got 2 projects funded in the same year, and the state office of NRCS had to go back to the feds to request extra funding to fund all the projects. And NRCS is a little different from the LCF in that they won't fund a project unless they can fully fund it. So if they can't hit that 50% threshold of funding, they won't fund it. So it's kind of a weird system where you can have a really high-ranking farm, but because they don't have money, they'll go down to the next farm that might be smaller and easier to where they can fully fund it. The LCF will approach you and say, can you make it work with less than you asked for? So there's a little more flexibility there. Anyways, we're excited about the traction that we're getting in Upper Rappahannock, and I'm open to questions and discussion. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
Well, I'll just say well done. Very impressive. I know it takes a village with 7 collaborators, and you got to figure out the planning and the funding, the timing, and Well done.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yeah.
I know the last farm bill, I think was 2018,
Mhm.
had a provision that said that 10% of the conservation program funding across multiple programs would go to source water protection project. And I wonder if that's anything that you all had learned about. I'm not sure what's being done to implement that provision, but you know, it really potentially a lot of money for the conservation.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with that part of it. Yeah. So. Anything else? Yeah, in the back.
Thanks for a great presentation. So for the land that's conserved, what percentage of it are you actively putting best management practices on? So
It all, well, theoretically, like conceptually, like the whole property, it has best management practices because the agricultural land easements require some level of farmland management plan, and they were trying to be more flexible on that. But then, like if it has highly erodible soils, it needs a plan for those areas. And then so NRCS started being looser in terms of what was required in terms of farm management, but like concurrently VLCF got tighter, or the state got tighter, so they're requiring plans really focused on water quality. So, you know, we still have to do the plans, but I think it is a good process, and it is a way to pull in, more partners. So we're typically working with NRCS to develop a plan that focuses on the agricultural resources, and then, let's see, we're pulling in Department of Forestry for the forestry part of it. And then the LCF does have, buffer requirements now. So, I mean, those are pretty standard anyways, but they've provided more clear guidelines. So we're, trying to meet what we have to meet or exceed those guidelines in terms of buffers. Yeah.
Are you clear there's a minimum acreage for the ALP program? And then there's follow how long has it from conception to renovation of the easement? Because you spoke to several players on national plans, there must be months and years.
Yeah, so it's usually, a typical easement, like a donated easement, we figure is about a year. And with these, it's about 3 years, so it takes a while. But that's where landowners during that time, landowners can be implementing some of the best management practices if they haven't already haven't done so, like the Goodalls. But also, we're trying to, just going through the process one time, I learned a lot of tricks in terms of things that we can do concurrently. So I think if things are sequenced properly, we can start to expedite it. And there is one, I think, a county-based farmland protection program. It might have been Clark County, where they got a project done in a year. There's also like a process where if you've done enough of these with NRCS, that you can submit a template that they have pre-approved, and then if you use that template, it doesn't have to go, each project doesn't have to go through national review. So there's things that we can work on to, get a better system, better, faster system going. So.
You figured out the efficiencies that you worked on.
What was that?
You're working on the efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's been kind of a tug and pull because, you know, these applications take quite a bit. And then, you know, the year that I did two program, you know, sets of applications, fortunately, they, you know, they ranked high and they got funding, but, you know, that was a huge time commitment. And, you know, that pulls you away from actually doing the pieces. So yeah, hopefully we can fine tune the system and get a better system in place to do more. There is also a kind of a related pot of funding through, it's called the RCPP, Resource Conservation Program, and that they will, NRCS will award you a pot of funding, and then you've got more flexibility to do that. And your easements can be, they don't have to follow the minimum terms of the program. You have a little more flexibility. But one thing that happened last year is
We're not so Rappahannock.
okay, yeah, so we had two projects. We advanced two projects, both were funded. And then at the last minute, I called the landowner I was working with to tell him the good news about getting funding. And, everyone worked hard to get this funding. Like, there was another case where NRCS went back to the national office to get extra funding. And because the real estate market had changed so much in the last 6 months, the landowner decided to withdraw. And we tried to get a replacement project in there, but NRCS, we wouldn't allow us to do that. And it ended up, all that wasted time pretty much on the project. So, but if you do get this RCPP program funding, you have more flexibility where, you can move it around. The land trust has more discretion in terms of which projects are funded. If someone pulls off, they can, pull it in resources. So we're looking at that.
So thank you
Yeah.
all so much. For
Yeah, thank you.
And if you will be around.
Yeah, I'll be around.
If you have more questions about this process, I'm sure you'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. And like I said, I'm really excited because, boy, I haven't been in a group to speak live to people. And even though I can't really see you behind your mask, just you not being on Zoom is really wonderful. So this is great in and of itself. Yeah, so let me get going. The folks this morning all set me up really well, right? Because Bettina said the trees are the answer, and then Terry said trees are the answer, and James Davis Martin said that what we're doing is unsustainable. And so next slide. They all talked about, to some degree, but James Davis Martin in particular. By the way, can you hear me in the very background? Okay, just wave if all of a sudden my voice starts to drop down. So James Davis Martin this morning said something that was really important. He's like, we have just recently received new 1 meter resolution data, and it's indicating that we're losing forest. So this is from the US. We worked with the USGS, and they're the ones who are about to release this. It should come out so that everybody's got access to it, and you guys can start drilling down into the numbers. But at the highest level within the Bay portion of Virginia, in the Chesapeake Bay portion, we lost 189,000 acres of forest over the last 4 years. So, we're averaging 47,000+ acres per year. Remember when James Davis Martin said, hey, we can't keep on with, if we're losing the lands, our natural resource lands that are low load lands, and we're converting that to high load lands, i.e. developed lands, if we keep doing that, the water has no place to go, and then you'll continue to see like the increased flooding that we saw in Philly and in New York. We've got to figure out a smarter way to both conserve forests, but also conserve our canopy. And that's what the Bay Foundation, as well as the Virginia Conservation Network, and many partners, so Ann Little and Friends of the Rappahannock, there are a group of probably 40 partners on our tree coalition calls, and anybody is welcome to join us, but the purpose is to try to find policy, state policy that the home builders and the commercial builders can agree to and say, yes, we can live with this, and that we, from a conservation perspective, say, this is what we need in order to conserve our forest land, right? So probably the second bullet is probably to me the most disturbing, because once that land goes into development, that 19,890 acres, that's hard surface now. We can't go replant that. I mean, there are a couple places where people are pulling up parking lots and reforesting that land, but that's not the trend, right? Those are the anomalies. You may wonder that last bullet where it says we are gaining in our urban and suburban tree canopy. The reason for that is these are the lands that are adjacent to the building, right? So, you got a house and you've got free lawn around it. That's your urban and suburban canopy, right? So it's gone from a forest land use to an urban and suburban land use, and that's why we're seeing a gain here. Does that make sense? I'll make sure. Okay, next slide. All right, so there are two pieces of state code. These are links on there. Are you guys kind of giving the slides out? Okay, so these are actual links that will take you directly to the state code. Policy is not something anybody loves to talk about, so I'm going to net it out as quickly as possible. The 961 replacement of trees during development, it basically has limits, and Virginia is one of the only states in the country that has a cap on what we're asking developers to replace when they clear land. It's pretty unusual. We have many more, there are many more states that are more conservative than Virginia, but this is pretty friendly to the development community. So for instance, for industrial and commercial properties, it says that 10% of the canopy has to be replaced. For residential, it goes as high as 25%. So how many of you are in local government? handful, right? Do you guys currently have a tree canopy goal? Does anybody know a tree canopy goal for your locality? A stated goal? Anybody, give me your number.
25%.
25%?
No, 45.
45% in Fredericksburg. So
Yeah.
Richmond, it's 40. Norfolk's, aiming at 40. So quickly, just do the math, right? If you're replacing 10% on commercial and industrial sites and you're replacing 25% on your residential sites, and your stated goal is that you're going to maintain 40% canopy within your jurisdiction, just math that up, right? I mean, the trend is in the wrong direction. So that's a replacement. That's the first piece of code. The second one is the conservation of trees. This is much deeper. I'll say it's much more comprehensive. But the 961.1, that is pretty important because it gives local governments the authority to establish a tree fund, right? So that, people like in Arlington, for instance, and in Virginia Beach and in Alexandria, where they're pretty built out, if you talk to their urban foresters, they're going to say to you, we currently don't really have a lot of municipal space left to plant. We've got to get, 20% of the land is municipally owned, roughly, 80% is privately owned. The only place to plant trees is on private property. Well, the importance of 961.1 is it allows money to go from the developer, if they can't achieve the percentage on that parcel, to go into a fund that then can be used by nonprofits like Tree Fredericksburg to plant on private property. That's the importance of that piece of code. And again, it's local authority, which means that the locality now is given the authority from the state because we're a delimitable state, but the locality has to adopt the ordinance. So it's a two-step process, right? This is not mandatory. This is a voluntary authority. Any questions so far? Okay, next slide. All right, so you may say, well, and what do you not like? What's not good enough of that existing state code? I already talked about section J. We would like to just strike that completely. That's the one that's got really limits and says that the most you can ask a developer to replace is 10%, right? Depending on the setting. But let's go back to the first one. The one that I said was most comprehensive, the conservation of trees. That's limited planning district 8. Does anybody know where that is? So that's Fairfax County, Arlington, Loudoun County, Manassas Park, Manassas. There's another town in there. It's basically 7 localities all up in Northern Virginia, right? So it's very limited. So limited, a tiny little piece of geography. Those are the only localities in the entire state right now that can adopt that code. So the first thing is, let's strike that. Let's remove that geographic limitation. Yeah.
How many of those localities did adopt that?
Great question. So Arlington adopted 0.1 almost in its entirety. So did Prince William County. Fairfax County had adopted, I'd say, most of it before it actually became state code. And it was, Delegate Bulova was the author of it and pretty much wrote it around Fairfax County's tree ordinance, right? So that's sort of how it came to be. Great question. And I actually don't know Alexandria. I was trying to dig in to get to that a few weeks ago. I'll get to that later. Great question. All right. The other thing that's a little bit different from locality to locality is it says that the trees must attain that canopy percentage within 20 years. But if you go back and you look at some of the ordinances that are currently on the books, Leesburg, Loudoun County, Fairfax County, Prince William County, they all have, and Williamsburg, all have to attain their canopy, those canopy goals within 10 years, right? Because they adopted their ordinance language prior to when these statutes went into effect.
Is it counterintuitive when you want canopy?
Excuse me?
Would you prefer to have canopy within 2 years?
So what thing I would, what that would mean is think about like just a planting, right? What's happening now is if you have a 1/4 acre lot, put a tree on it. I mean, you put a house on it. You've got enough land to put 2-3 trees to achieve 25% canopy in 20 years. You can plant 1 red maple and you'll get there. And that's why you see, as you drive around new subdivisions, 1 tree in every front yard. I mean, think about it. That's what's happening. So it could be you plant 2 trees, and so you get that canopy in 10 years. You would in effect have to double the number that you planted. Okay. So yes, personally, I would love that. Okay, next slide. All right, so sure. All right, so the bills that were put forward, hey, skip a slide real quick. Let's go back 1 slide for 1 second. Let me just see. Oh yeah, I did. Okay, one more thing. So the bills that were introduced last year, these are the 2 bill numbers. So Delegate Guy, hers was 2042. The Senate bill was Senate Bill 1393. Now I'll go to the next slide. What they asked for was, in these circumstances, a locality should be able to adopt whatever canopy percentages they want or need to achieve their community's goals. So one was to reduce their stormwater to achieve their MS4 permits, right? The second one was, and I think about the city of Richmond, for instance, think about Harrisonburg, Virginia Beach, Newport News, Hampton, to address canopy equity in formerly redline communities. The huge discrepancies. The third is I was asking about, within comp plans, within the locality's comprehensive plan, roughly 50% of them have a stated canopy goal, right? So that would be one more reason why you could potentially ask developers to have higher canopy goals. And then the last one is to reduce the current flooding in Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act areas. So that, just a reminder, probably everybody in this room knows the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act area is the tidal areas that are east of I-95. Okay, under those 4 circumstances, a local government could adopt higher canopy goals. All right, next slide. All right, so what happened in the legislation? It got out of committee, yay. And it's just quickly important to know, the House bill comes before House, County, Cities, and Towns is the committee that comes before. And the Senate side, it comes before local government, right? So I would say, despite the fact that the city of Hampton, Roanoke, Lynchburg, you think these are not, some of these are pretty conservative localities, came to start through the 2 committee and said, we want this enabling legislation. They still added an enactment clause that says, a reenactment clause, which says that bill's got to come up again this year in order to be passed. The Senate added that there had to be a stakeholder advisory group meeting. And that stakeholder advisory group is going on right now, right? Then today is the 4th meeting, and they're ironing out the ins and outs of what that legislation could potentially look like. Because as you can imagine, the home builders and the commercial builders and ag as stakeholders, they've got a different perspective, and we've got to respect that. And meanwhile, we're sort of looking long term and going, well, we're also need to conserve trees, because if we don't, we're going to continue to have some flooding issues and never meet our day goals, right? So that's where we are in the process. They're the 4th meeting today, from 1 to 4. And the last thing that had happened was They divided into groups of 2, so I guess they're saying there's like 14 people on the advisory. They divided into groups of 2. They're dealing with different pieces of the ordinance language. So for instance, there's a group that's really concerned about penalties and said, you know what, maybe we should have some penalties if there are repeat offenders. There's a group that's looking at the cluster development ordinance language. So what that would do is enable a locality to say, we're going to give a developer the ability to have higher density in one part of this. Let's take a 100-acre plot and say, if he or she conserves 40% of that as open space, then the remaining area can be higher density. That's the trade-off. That's the give and take for that. Currently, localities have, what the code says is the locality has to be growing at 10% a year in order to adopt a cluster development ordinance. So are any localities growing at 10% a year? The answer is no, right? I mean, even Stafford and Spotsy, which are growing really quickly, are growing at 10% a year. So that language pretty much just prohibits any locality from being able to adopt cluster ordinances. So that's something that they're looking at in the Stakeholder Advisory Group meeting. They have to report out by November 1st. It's being co-chaired by Department of Forestry and Department of Natural Resources, Department of Ag, Secretary of Ag, and Secretary of Natural Resources. The importance of that is it means that from a natural resources perspective, we're probably looking at it from a water perspective, right? The reason that Advocate they're looking at it more from a silviculture perspective and making sure that there is no enabling legislation that's going to prohibit forestry from being able to do silviculture activities. Okay, so that's the balance. Any questions about the SAG meeting? No? Okay. Next slide. All right, so where do we go from here? I would remember, I've said before, it goes before House, County, Cities, and Towns, and it comes before local government, are the 2 committees. If your delegate or senator sits on either one of those committees, or even if they don't, then I would encourage you to encourage them to support this enabling legislation. That's the first thing. We're currently working to get local governments, they're working on their legislative agenda right now. And many of you may recall when the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund initially became available, we worked really hard to make sure that every locality knew those dollars were available. And we asked for the local governments to request in their legislative package that those dollars were included in the state budget. And after doing that a couple of years, we consistently were able to get about $50 million from the Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. But it was all of you, it's the collective locality effort that made that happen. So what we're asking for right now is we have a single paragraph, it's maybe 50 words, and it says, you know, we ask you, our legislators, to support this enabling legislation that's going to preserve and protect tree canopy. If you want that exact paragraph and you're in local government, then shoot me an email and I'm happy to send it to you. We're also asking for funding in the Water Quality Improvement Fund to go towards urban forestry programs. The reason for that is it is probably the most under-resourced organization within any local government, whether it's an arborist or the state forester. They don't have the ability to currently maintain the trees that they currently have in the ground. And, you know, and then that sets up this, and maybe 10 or 20 years down the road, but that sets up this horrible, oh, this tree fell on my house, right? Because the structural pruning that should have happened in year 3 didn't. So, you know, we can stop, we can prevent so many bad people, property, tree problems, you know, if we start early and we put those dollars into urban forestry. So that's the other ask. The first is authority, the second is budget money. please help educate your board of supervisors and your city council members about the importance of trees. If you see this, if you see that they are, they're talking about their legislative package, this is the time to go and talk to city council and say, I would really like to see my locality, I'd like to see the city of Fredericksburg adopt, this ordinance language, but it can't do that until it supports this enabling legislation. If you're on social media, hashtag for trees, please, or rooted in Virginia, or the more people that we can get sharing that story, the better. Next slide. By the way, I hope that you guys can tell all these tree pictures were taken in Fredericksburg. Are you recognizing all this? I live a block away from campus, and so I'm always walking through campus. All right, but like I said, the team really set me up. I don't have to tell you all of these benefits, but I'll give you some pretty interesting numbers. I mean, it is going to get hotter and it's going to get wetter. And each acre of forest sequesters 0.62 metric tons of carbon. We just got the UN report. We got to be thinking about longer term, and we got to build better now. We know it's going to get wetter, for instance. DEQ will eventually update stormwater rules. Right now, we have to design for a 1-inch rainstorm. How many 1-inch rainstorms have we had versus how many 3-inch rainstorms or 2.5-inch rainstorms? So even our stormwater best management practices are being overwhelmed because of the increased precipitation, and that's only going to get worse. And the heat, you're talking about heat islands, the number of people who die as a result of heat is higher than hurricanes, floods, tornadoes. It is the #1 killer, right? So from a health perspective, we've got to do a better job, particularly in our urban and suburban settings, of getting more trees on the ground and preserving what we've got. All right, so they have functional beauty. Oh, I love the last one, which I just found out. This is on the EPA website. It reduces the need for pavement maintenance, right? Shaded, that asphalt doesn't break down as fast if it's shaded, which I didn't know. So for local governments, if you're responsible for part of your roads, tree them. All right, last slide. I always like to end on a, I always like to end on a, well, where are we headed? No.
Oh, we don't have any. This is the last one.
Oh, interesting. I think I saved an old, okay, well, you have to imagine this beautiful whale that is breaching out of the, right in front of Bennington Road's bridge trail, and that's where we're headed. To have a watershed that's going to support all aquatic life and our joy from seeing things like breaching whales. So I'm sorry that slide didn't make it in there, but thank you very much. And please, any questions? Yeah.
I noticed that the legislation talks about tree replacement. Was there any talk at any point about conservation of existing?
Great question. So the question was, one piece of legislation talks about replacement, and what is there about conservation? Remember a few slides back, there are 2 different pieces of code. One is replacement, the other is conservation. So what we want is that both of them, we need both of them to be geographically not limited, and they both are currently limited. The replacement canopy code is limited to the Chesapeake Bay. The preservation and conservation is limited to the planning district 8. And that's, I'll just say, if you took a look at 961.1, it's pretty comprehensive. It gives localities a lot of authority to preserve existing canopy. And even things, it's got some language in there that says, hey, the locality can adopt credits so that if, let's say you've got a really just high value natural resource area. It's a oak hickory forest. It's 50 to 75 years old. The stand is healthy. No invasive species. This is a good could stand a forest. And so the locality says, this is worth it to me to preserve this. They would have the ability to give additional credit to achieve the canopy goals for that stand of forest. So it's like, it's got some of that enabling like language in it. Yeah, Brian.
This may be a different piece of legislation, but I also understand that there's a work group to develop a BMP for forest retention, which would be pretty much tool for them as forest to say, we're going to prevent that from developing, and the delta in runoff now and what runoff could happen is what we get to credit some percentage of that. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so that was Delegate Bulliva's bill, and it passed actually 2 years ago. The work group is meeting finally this year. And basically it says DEQ must establish a credit for trees that are planted or preserved as a best management practice. Well, but you might be conflating two things, in that last year DEQ added in its guidance to MS4 communities that it could take credit for planting and preserving land, and as part of its MS4 TMDO action plan. So DEQ already gave that guidance to the MS4 permit holders. But I think what you're talking about is trees as a best management practice. And where this really comes into play, particularly up in Northern Virginia, you know, we get calls of people saying, hey, they're putting in this pocket BMP, this like square, you know, small best management practice. They're taking down a tree in order to put in that stormwater best management practice. And that's because currently the trees are not listed in the best management practice manual that the developer, how he calculates his stormwater credit. It's got to be in that BMP clearinghouse manual in order for the developer to be able to take stormwater credit on that site when he's developing. Yeah, it's done.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think we are.
Yes.
Some more questions.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any urban areas in Virginia that are kind of taking the lead in terms of addressing the heat islands that are often highly correlated with like historically redlined parts of the set.
Yeah, I think Richmond has probably done the very best, and they did it because the Office of Sustainability created all the layers from a mapping perspective that said, these are our vulnerable communities. This is where we have no canopy, and here is, and they did the thermography to say, and this is where the heat is. So now that allows you, those three layers allow you to zero in and say, that census block, that census block, and this census block are the three where we've got to go plant trees. Okay. All right, I'll be around for lunch. Thank you very much.
American Farmland Trust launched the conservation agriculture movement in 1980. Together, we protect agricultural land. We promote environmentally sound farming and ranching practices. And we fight to keep farmers and ranchers where they belong. On the land. We are more than policy and land protection. American Farmland Trust works to protect your water. American Farmland Trust launched the conservation agriculture movement in 1980. Together, we protect agricultural land. We promote environmental American Farmland